feel a bit sorry for Colin. After all, he is the innocent party in all of this. I suppose he's what you'd call collateral damage. But then you can't make an omelette without breaking eggs. Enough of the metaphors. I just hope that once Colin gets over the shock of seeing his marriage go down the toilet, he'll one day look back fondly and reflect on the fantastic sex we had in my bed. And various other locations around the house. Do you know, Tina called me a bitch? Less than an hour ago when she found me in bed with her husband. Luckily, Colin had finished the job, so at least she didn't walk in on him in flagrant, which I always think can be highly embarrassing for all concerned. Yep. She called me a bitch. That's a bit rich coming from her. I have to admit that Colin has been a godsend since Simon died. Doing all those little jobs around the house that my dear departed husband should have done. And the gardens never looked better. On more than one occasion, I asked Tina if it was all right Colin spending so much time round at my place. After all, I didn't want her to think I was taking advantage of his good nature. She, being the true, loyal friend she has been, told me to take advantage whenever I liked. God, did I take advantage. The sudden and unexpected departure of my beloved husband came as a bit of a shock to everyone who knew him. Don't think his mother will ever get over it. But at least you could say it was quick. Well, relatively quick. I suppose in the few seconds between him falling off the cliff edge and hitting the rocks below, it can't have been that fun for him. But one can only hope that on impact with the granite, it made for a relatively quick and painless end. Everyone at the inquest was very sympathetic. And of course they all wanted to know what on earth was Simon doing so close to the edge of such a notoriously dangerous precipice. Well, I explained that my hat had blown off in the breeze and had landed on a rocky outcrop near the edge, and Simon, being Simon, insisted on doing the gallant thing and retrieve it. I told the coroner I begged Simon not to be so stupid as to risk his life over a hat that could easily be replaced in Keswick, but he wouldn't listen. He slipped on the wet rocks and fell to his death. Everyone agreed that that sounded like the Simon we all knew and loved. Action man right up to the end. Death by misadventure was the verdict of the inquest. And the coroner told all concerned afterwards that it was tragic how someone so comparatively young with such a bright future ahead of them should lose their life in such avoidable circumstances. And then went on to say that although the Lake District is a very beautiful place, the greatest care should be taken whilst climbing some of the highest peaks. Wise words. He then offered me his deepest sympathies and told me that time is a great healer. For a grieving widow, I thought I held up rather well. The dental practice where I worked were very understanding. They told me to take off as much time as I need and not to rush back until I get over the trauma. Trauma! Simon's funeral was all very unremarkable. Lots of people told the mass congregation what a great guy he was and that he'd be sadly missed. You know, the usual stuff. Oh, the do afterwards was very good. It was held in the local pub. To be fair, they put on a very good spread. Lots of people came up to me afterwards to give their condolences. Although one of his friends took the opportunity to make a pass at me. Can you believe? Even though his wife was standing on the other side of the room eating a sausage roll. I must admit that the idea of making a move on Colin didn't occur to me until after the funeral. Up until that point, my only thought was getting my revenge on my lying, cheating bastard of a husband for sleeping with my best friend. Don't know if my particular situation is unique or not, but it certainly raises one or two interesting questions. I mean, sure, lots of wives discover their husbands have been having an affair, but usually it's with the secretary, or someone at work, or someone they met in a bar. In which case, the wronged wife, if you can call her that, has only one object to vent her fury at: the husband. But when you discover hubby has been shagging your lifelong best friend, who do you blame the most? Eventually, and after much consideration, I came to the conclusion that Tina was the biggest culprit in this particular case. I mean, after all, everyone knows that men think with their dicks. I proved that when I tempted Colin into my bed. And Colin is just about the last person you would ever think would cheat on his wife. And then there's the question, what kind of person would sleep with their best friend's husband? I mean, surely it's a complete no-no. I've known Tina, like, forever. We were at school together. We were almost joined at the hip. We've endured the trials and tribulations of our teenage years together, helped each other overcome crippling self-doubt, cried on each other's shoulders, usually over some stupid boy. Together, we have battled ache, split ends, disastrous haircuts, fashion faux pas, and drunken morons on holiday in Tenerife. I mean, we even spent a week together in a tent in North Wales watching it piss down every sodding day. I mean, doesn't that count for something? It was Simon's wish that his ashes should be scattered from the top of Blencathra. Sod that! I wasn't climbing all the way up there. He's lucky I didn't flush him down the toilet. But I did make the effort. Climbed to the top of Castle Crag. I mean, after all, it is still the Lake District. I asked my best friend for life, Tina, if she would like to accompany me. I thought it poignant she should be there when I scattered the rotten sod to the four corners of the wind. I also knew that Tina wasn't particularly outdoorsy, and I half hoped that the strain of climbing up Castle Crag might bring on a sudden asthma attack and kill her. No such luck. I even contemplated a little accident on the way back down, but decided against it, on account that having two people plunge to their deaths only a few weeks apart whilst in my sole company might look a bit suspicious. And after all, by that time I'd already made up my mind I was going to ruin her marriage. So, I began to plan a little scheme that would ultimately result in Colin ending up in my bed. Now, I was perfectly aware right from the beginning that that was not going to be an easy task. Colin, although very fond of me, saw me only as a friend. His feelings for me were wholly platonic. And after all, I was his wife's best friend. And I mean, who would cheat on their wife with her best friend? As I've said, there was no problem getting Colin to pop round, doing no end of little jobs. I only had to call his mobile and he'd come running. I always greeted him with a big hug and then said goodbye with another, even bigger hug. But that wasn't getting anywhere. I was going to have to up the ante. I decided to introduce vodka into the equation, gradually giving the impression that I was drinking far more than was good for me. Often, whenever Colin was coming round, I would put a bottle of vodka and a glass on the table, or sometimes on the kitchen surface, giving the impression that they'd been left there since the night before. A couple of times, usually on a Sunday, I pretended to have a hangover, complaining of a headache. Sometimes as well, I would call Tina up late at night and slur my speech and ramble on about how much I miss my husband. And then I'd give a little weep, as a drunk might. It worked. Both were convinced I was headed off the rails and invited themselves round for a little chat. They came straight to the point, told me that they were very concerned about me, in particular the amount of vodka I was consuming, and that although it was very tragic what had happened to me, life must go on and I must always look forwards and not dwell in the past. I exploded. I told both of them what right did they have coming round my place and telling me how I should live my life. And as for Tina telling me she knew how I felt was just a load of crap. How could she possibly know how I felt or what I was going through? In short, I told both of them to mind their own sewing business and keep their noses out of mine before opening the front door and telling them both to piss off. It was an Oscar-winning performance, though I say so myself. I decided to wait 48 hours before turning up on their doorstep to give my grovelling apology. Now, the reason why I wanted to convince Colin and Tina that I was on the brink of becoming a full-time pisshead were twofold. Firstly, I wanted to appear much more vulnerable. And I wanted an opportunity to remind Colin that I was a woman, a sensual, sexual being. You'll see why in a minute. Tina answered the door and immediately invited me in and brought rather a good bottle of red as a peace offering. Both seemed pleased to see me, and wasn't long before we were sat round the kitchen table enjoying the wine, once again the best of friends. I admitted that over the past few weeks I had behaved like a total cow. And how could Colin ever forgive me? Both said I had nothing to apologise for, that I'd been through a horrible experience, and that no matter what, they would always be there for me. Aw, wasn't that sweet? I told them both that from now on, I was going to get on with my life. I was going to pull myself together, stop living and dwelling in the past. I admitted that over the past few weeks, my evening and nights had descended into a mind-numbing routine of TV soaps, vodka and masturbation. But now that the evenings were getting lighter, I was going to get outside and sort the back garden out. It would be a project for me this summer. I asked Tina if I could borrow her husband for some heavy lifting occasionally. Of course, she confirmed it was. I made a promise to them, right there and then, that from now on, no more vodka, no more crappy telly. But I wasn't about to make any promises about the masturbation. On account, I was rather enjoying that. Which I thought was very funny. But I don't think Tina saw it that way. I suppose you don't normally say something like that in front of somebody's husband. Summer arrived, and Colin, true to his word, was there to help me with the garden whenever I wanted him. Luckily, it was warm enough for me to wear some low-cut t-shirts, affording me plenty of opportunities to make sure that Colin got a good look at my cleavage whenever possible. I even turned some jeans into the shortest, tightest shorts you've ever seen. Kylie would have been proud. But decided against wearing them on account they made me look like a hooker. Were damned uncomfortable too, and I suspect if I'd worn them for any length of time I would have probably developed the old thrush. Do you know, I rather enjoyed transforming my back garden. We raised a flower bed with the aid of 3 railway sleepers and planted lots of different flowering plants and shrubs. But I don't want to turn this into gardener's question time. No. To show my appreciation for all that Colin had done for me, I invited both of them to a meal at the pub. My treat. Luckily, our local serves very good food, and by the time we'd eaten dessert, we'd all consumed rather a lot of wine and were, to say the least, a little bit merry. Although the rubber plant next to me had received an additional watering that night. When I thought the moment was ripe, I decided to make the announcement that I was thinking of getting a rabbit. Colin, bless him, looked ever so confused, and then he said he could build it a hutch. I laughed at him drunkenly and I said, "Not that type of rabbit." He looked confused. A rampant rabbit? He was still none the wiser. I could tell Tina was far from being amused and told him I meant a vibrator, which was an O from hubby. Do you know, I told them that this was not just any vibrator. I was a bit worried it would knock my fillings out. Which I thought was very funny, but Tina didn't see it that way. Of course, if she said anything the next day, I had the excuse that I was drunk at the time and I couldn't remember anyway. Oh, yes. So, as summer reached into August, I knew that if I was ever going to seduce my best friend's husband, it was going to have to be sometime soon. After all, sweaty girl in low-cut t-shirt with boosted cleavage stood a far better chance than girl under layers of woolly jumpers. I decided to go for it one particularly hot Saturday afternoon. I planned everything with military precision. I would be deadheading some roses near the French windows, which would be open. French windows being direct route into lounge. On floor of lounge would be the largest, thickest sheepskin rug I could find on eBay. I wasn't manipulating him up to the bedroom. No. The shortest distance from A to B was imperative. giving him as little chance as possible for an attack of conscience to pour cold water all over his ardour. When I was sure that Colin was looking in my direction, I went into meltdown, dropped my pruners, buried my face in my hands, made a wailing noise, shook violently, and did a damn good impression of crying. He rushed over, concerned, and cradled me in his arms, and I told him, I can't do this anymore, and I'm sick of telling everyone I'm fine when every day I die just a little bit more. I thought that was a particularly good line. I can't remember where I got it from. Anyway, I told him that I'd never felt so alone and unhappy. And he told me, I know, and it's unfair. And I told him that if it hadn't have been for him coming round like this, God knows what I would have done. He told me he'd always be there for me. I told him he was a good man and that Tina was very lucky to be married to such a kind, thoughtful man. Do you know, nothing could have prepared me for what Colin said next. He suddenly opened up to me. He told me that things weren't so great between Tina and himself, and that although she was half decent with him out in company, when they were alone together, she hardly ever spoke to him. They hadn't made love in over a year. Seems I wasn't the only one flying solo. I came out with lots of oh my gods and she must be mad, and I told him he must be mistaken, but he told me he wasn't, and that I wasn't the only one that was miserable, and that coming round here had been a heaven-sent opportunity for him to get out of the house. Oh, Colin. I hugged him tightly, and he began to cry. This really wasn't in the script. I told him that I pulled back and we'd be having none of that, and that I had sole rights to crying in this garden. I wiped a tear off his cheek, and then he suddenly kissed me. Okay, this wasn't quite how I'd planned it, but we got to first base somehow. In fact, we kissed for quite a while, before I led him by the hand into the lounge and over to the sheepskin rug. He hesitated, and I told him we both deserve this. We kissed again, and then, employing my very best parachute landing technique, made it safely into a horizontal position. Do you know, the one concern I had when I hatched this little plan of revenge was, how would I react to making love to a man I didn't really fancy? I mean, I imagined I'd have to do a lot of faking, but to be honest, the sex turned out to be a bit of a bonus. Now, our first encounter wasn't very long and was far from memorable, but we got there, so to speak. Afterward, Colin was mortified. Kept saying how sorry he was and that it should never have happened, and that he'd taken advantage of the situation and that it must never happen again. I realised that what I said next was vital if I did not want this to end up a one-night stand. The last thing I needed was for a guilt-ridden Colin to dash out of the house, never to return. I needed a full-blown affair that I could shove down Tina's throat at an appropriate time. So I just came right out with it. I was glad it had happened, and that I had secretly fancied him for years. I'd fancied him from the first moment we'd met. and that even though he was going out with my best friend, I considered dumping Simon and making a play for him, but was too much of a coward to do anything about it. I told him that no, I was not sorry, and that I would cherish that afternoon for the rest of my life. All 3 minutes of it. Oh. I told him that I didn't know if what we'd done was right or wrong, but it certainly felt right. And that maybe tomorrow I might feel guilty, but right then, no. I said that even though he was going out with my best friend, I would be lying if I said that I hadn't thought about it before, even when I was married to Simon. And that I told him that if this was to be a one-off, he should not spoil things by telling me we should be ashamed of ourselves, because I wasn't. I mean, didn't I deserve a bit of sparkle in my life? He had lit up my life. And the award for Best Actress goes to... Oh. We dressed silently, and I could tell he was still full of guilt. But he turned up the next day, and we spent the entire afternoon in bed. Now, Colin is like a lot of men when it comes to making love. He knows precisely where the door is, but he hasn't got a clue when it comes to ringing the bell. No, now I was adamant right from the start that things were going to have to improve in that department. Luckily, Colin was perfectly aware to take on my little suggestions that might improve our love life. Do you know, I was a bit disappointed that Tina was no longer allowing Colin his conjugal rights. Because if she had, she would have found her husband to be a far better lover, which would have certainly aroused her suspicions, amongst other things. Now, most people who are having extramarital affairs are terrified of being found out, whereas I couldn't wait for Tina to catch me bonking her husband. But weeks went by without so much as a near miss. I mean, Christ, the guy was practically living at my place. I mean, was she dense? Or perhaps she just didn't care. But eventually, Dame Fortune finally intervened. Tina happened to be driving past my house and happened to notice Colin's car parked outside, which was nothing unusual, except it was a Tuesday afternoon when we should have both been at work. I don't think I will ever forget the look on Tina's face. It was a mixture of shock, disbelief, and later, uncontrollable anger. I've already told you that she called me a bitch. I daren't tell you what she called Colin, but it included every four-letter word in the English language. And you know, while she was delivering this tirade of venom, all I could think was, how do you like it, Tina? Eventually, when she'd run out of things to say, she turned on her heels and stormed out of the room, pursued by Colin. He was putting his trousers on at the same time. It did not make for a dignified spectacle. Revenge is a dish best served cold. Well, that's what they say, isn't it? Am I ashamed of how I've behaved? No. Tina had it coming. And as for Colin, he did not have to get inside my knickers, so no, I don't think I've got anything to be ashamed about. Oh, before I forget, it appears Simon took out rather a large insurance policy on his life. Apparently, I'm rather well off. I was thinking of changing the car and maybe going on holiday somewhere exotic this winter. I've always fancied South Africa. What? What did you say? Did I kill my husband? Of course I did. It was an accident. Everyone knows that.
Now something died.